Have you ever purposely tried to get revenge on someone only to realize it hurt them way worse than you intended? If so, what did you do? A girl at school kept telling her friends my sister was a witch. I accidentally spilled chili on her new shirt. Turns out her gran had just passed away and they had gone shopping for that shirt together like the week before, making it the last thing she ever gave her. She was out of school for about a month for personal stuff, and to be fair, my sister is a complete witch. I guess that's where they say revenge is a dish best served chili. Story 2. I was in grade 8. We had this new kid named Caleb move to our town. He came from a rough home in a different city and had been sent to live with his aunt and uncle in our small little town. Anyways, he managed to fit in pretty well and became friends with most of the boys in fairly short order. So one day at recess, all the boys were playing basketball outside on a cement pad with hoops at either end. Caleb, hoping to show off how tough he is, decides to start not playing by the rules. He's committing hard fouls, literally hurting other kids in the arm when they went up for shots. He missed one time and harmed a kid in the face. And he says, "What, we're playing by street rules?" A couple of days later, he's still doing this and still using the same excuses. We all told him to stop and play normal, but he won't. So I decide it's time to teach him a lesson. I get the ball right under the hoop, fake like I'm going up for the shot to get him off his feet, then I bend to the hips and get really low. His knees basically come in contact with my side and he does a full flip and lands flat on his butt. I stand back up, make my shot and say, "Street rules, right?" It's at this point I notice he's actually in quite a lot of pain. Turns out he broke his tailbone, but when he recovered, you better damn well believe he played basketball by the rules. Story 3. We had one person in our group in university who was not pulling his weight. He would submit things translated from different languages that were not in English. He would submit them without any references, and he would never attend meetings. Looking back, he was probably just out of his means, but it didn't feel like he was even trying. My group decided on a day he didn't come to class, we assume, purposely, avoiding a meeting we had planned for right after, to tell him we had had a very large test that day that he missed. We just sent some messages in the group chat saying, "That was a hard test, and does anyone know how much that was weighted?" I know I failed. One look at the course outline and you could see we had not had a test. He dropped the class the next day. Story 4. There was a coworker who bought a new car when gas prices were high and he constantly bragged about how much money he was saving and how great his gas mileage was. A coworker decided to play a prank and each day he snuck out to the parking lot and secretly topped off his gas tank. The daily bragging continued and after about 2 weeks we stopped secretly adding gas to his new car. Suddenly he stopped bragging about his gas mileage and how much money he was saving. After another couple of weeks we asked him for an update on the car. He told us he sold it because it was a piece of crap and his gas mileage decreased drastically. We never told him about the prank. Story 5. As a wise old lady I used to work for once told me, the best revenge is no revenge. Make them think you're going to utterly embarrass them and then do nothing. One of the two things will happen, nothing, or they will have a full-blown panic attack. I used this once on a former friend who tried to coerce my wife into sleeping with him. By the way, my wife wouldn't give this fool the time of day. I let him know I knew and told him I was coming for him. He literally and legitimately had a full-blown mental breakdown. I sat back and did nothing. Part of me feels bad for damaging him psychologically. Part of me doesn't. So I don't know how to feel anymore other than relief he is out of my life. Story 6. A man followed my mom home from work, a bar about 20 minutes away, on foot. He followed her into the house, almost breaking the door and exposed himself in the living room. I was upstairs at the time, so I only heard, but when she said, "Put that thing away and get out of my house," I picked up a hatchet from my stepdad's tools and ran downstairs telling him that in 10 seconds, he's going to be out of my house or he's going to be facing serious harm. He ran, tripped over the doorframe, and knocked himself out cold on the driveway. He was hurting from his ears, a bad injury. Mom told me to call my stepdad, who was at his friend's house, and they both came running to get rid of him. Last I heard, he was deaf in his left ear and blind in his left eye from an unexplained head injury. Story 7. During my divorce, my ex had a friend who was constantly talking trash, sending me DMs full of bad words, sharing stories about a current relationship with my ex, and sent me a video of her and my ex drinking and driving while calling me names. So I compiled all of it, sent it to her son's father, and he used it to get full custody of their son. She now sees him once a month and pays enough child support that forced her to move back to her parents' house. I finally replied to her DMs telling me I ruined her life with a picture of her ex and I with our sons together at a baseball game, saying, "Guess I see your son more than you do now." She attempted to end it all a couple of months later, where she was then involuntarily detained and forced into a 72-hour hold. Think I won that one. Story 8. Okay, I've never told a single soul about this, not my husband, my best friend, or even my therapist, so for some backstory, I was essayed. I only told my two best friends at the time what had happened, and one of them told me I deserved it. Keep in mind, this was my best friend. They had been for years. They tore me down so emotionally for months, even years after. They had me convinced that I was damaged goods and no one would ever love me. We fell out of touch once they left for college. I tamped down my hatred and went on with my life. Years later, I mean like well into my 20s, something in me finally snapped and I was bound and determined to get revenge. So I shipped them a vile package. I found their address online and anonymously had a box of animal crap shipped to their home. I paid extra to have it covered in novelty confetti and made to look like a cupcake, while their toddler decided to play in it, making a mess of themselves in the kitchen. I guess it was so bad they hired a professional to come clean it up. How do I know this? A relative of mine goes to the same church as my ex-best friend's mom. She told my relative at the church, and that's how I found out. I felt and still feel horribly guilty. Story 9. I wasn't cool in junior high. Evan was in most of my classes and he wasn't cool either, but apparently he thought that I was lame enough that I would be a viable target. He would mock me at any opportunity. There was plenty. I was a weird kid. I remember he liked to lick his hand and smear it over my locker. Disgusting. So now, for revenge. Evan had a reputation for being a nerd and he liked to brag about how smart he was, how he was a math whiz, etc. For each class, all of the student grades were posted on a tack board. Each student had a unique number assigned to them. To find your grade, you first had to find your number, and the grade for each exam and class project was posted next to it. I realized at some point that my unique number had my birth month and day in the middle, with random numbers before and after. A friend confirmed that their number also included their birthday. Evan made the mistake of mentioning one day that his birthday was on St. Patrick's Day. You can probably see where this is going. One day in math class, we got one of our exams back. Evan saw my grade and started laughing at me, calling me stupid for only getting a B+. He wanted to know, how did I do so badly on a test that was so easy? I asked him what he got on the test. A+, he told me smugly. Yeah, I said, let's see it then. But he wouldn't show me his paper. He had conveniently already sorted it away in a folder. I decided to see what his grade was for myself. I marched over to the grade board and searched for the student number with 317 in it, St. Patrick's Day. I found it, and next to the number, D's, F's, more D's. I announced to the class that you can just use someone's birthday to figure out their number and grade. I locked eyes with Evan and began listing each of his grades out loud. I still remember the look on his face, abject horror which quickly morphed into a broken, hopeless expression. And then he started crying and left the classroom. This kid wasn't cool. He wasn't attractive. All he had was his intelligence, or the lie about it anyway. Now he had nothing, and on top of that, he cried openly in class. The kid never lived it down, not as long as I knew him anyway, which truthfully was only another year or so. I only got a stern talking to for what I had done, but Evan got ridiculed for the rest of the time he went to that school. I don't think I realized the full scope of what I had done until I was older. We were both losers, just trying to make it through junior high without too much emotional damage, and I had to destroy this kid over some snarky comment that didn't really mean much of anything at the end of the day. Story 10. A while ago, I posted how I made the mistake of renting out to a friend and his mom for barely more than what the place was costing me every year. They did several $1,000s in damage, and when I was able to finally kick them out, they of course left a complete mess since they were slobs. Anyway, the fact that I was able to kick them out put them into debt that they can't possibly afford before we can go through the process of adding the repairs to the bill. The unexpected result is that one of my former friends' siblings got dragged into it and is facing the same problems I had to deal with, and it is a contributing factor to them being on the brink of losing their home that they renovated from the ground up. Story 11. I had one Nerf gun for most of my childhood since my parents didn't like me playing with toy guns. The one I had was a small pistol that was about the size of my hand, but actually shot pretty hard for a Nerf gun, hard enough to sting for a while, maybe bruise if it hit a sensitive area close enough. Anyway, I brought this gun to my friend's birthday party in elementary school since he wanted to have a Nerf fight. Being outgunned by everyone there, my plan was centered around ambushes. The birthday boy had pelted me before running away to get more bullets, so I wanted to get him next. He crouched down by a tree, waiting to fire at another kid, and his back is to me. I pulled the trigger, aiming for the back of his neck when he turns around. I hit him with the full force of my hard-hitting pistol. He was understandably upset afterwards and hit me while holding his eye. The other kid saw what was going on and tried to back him up, but the host's parents broke it up and took care of their son. I didn't get any cake. He told me to get lost for the sleepover part and wouldn't talk to me for a week. Now, I just thought he was being a schmuck at the moment, but apparently the morning after the party, his eye still hurt and he couldn't quite see clearly out of the eye I hit him in because it was swollen. His parents took him to a doctor. Turns out I bruised his eye and he got some kind of medication or something to help with the swelling. So yeah, I definitely deserve what he did to me. Story 12. My old roommate kept eating all my food constantly for like almost a year. One of my greatest frustrations was him consuming all my almond milk before I got to have any. Now, after a really rough day, I would come home and have a bowl of Cocoa Puffs or some other childish comfort food cereal. It was part of my process. I didn't necessarily like almond milk, but it did last a lot longer and it was mine. Well, after months of discussing with him repeatedly whose almond milk and other food he kept consuming, I just filled the container up with real milk, looked at the container, and said, forget that guy, put it back in the fridge, and that was that. A couple of days later, I come home from work and find the shoddy roommate on the floor doubled over in pain, and I'm pretty sure he soiled his pants. I asked if he needed an ambulance. He said no, so I went to my room and put on headphones. I had no idea how badly lactose intolerant people can hurt from it. I sort of felt bad, but also literal months of warnings not to touch that bottle of almond milk. Also, forget that guy. The dude would eat my food and put the empty packages back so I wouldn't even know the food was gone until I picked up the packages to eat something. He wasn't broke. I offered him help if he needed it. He just didn't want to go to the store, which he told me mid-discussion about eating my food while laughing about it. Story 13. So when we were kids, my little brother loved root beer, like loved it. He had as many as mom would give him every day. When I was 10 and he was 8, he did something particularly annoying, and I pulled him into a room and told him, very seriously, that he had a drinking problem. He was super confused and didn't know what it meant. I told him, Craig, root beer is roots and beer, and you always want more. You have a beer problem. Now, we didn't know until later, but my brother is super autistic and he believed me very literally. About 6 or so years after that, we went to a family dinner at my mom's favorite Mexican restaurant and were ordering our drinks. My mom asked my brother why he didn't want the root beer. He used to love it. They have a really good one on tap. My poor, sweet brother looked at my mom so earnestly and told her that he can't have root beer anymore because he used to have a fixation, so he can't ever have root beer again. My mom immediately knew that I was behind it, and I still haven't lived it down. Story 14. My friends thought it would be funny to destroy my base and replace the area with dirt in Minecraft. Now, we've been playing in this world for quite a while, and we all had diamond armor. This was in realms, so people could play in the world whenever. They thought it would be funny to move all my items to an unknown location and blow up my base with TNT. They also covered the explosion so it looked like my base just kinda snapped out of existence. When I joined, I heard them laughing and knew something was wrong. I saw that my entire base was gone, so I left. I waited for my friends to get off the realm so I could enact my revenge. My friend had a llama that he named Josh. He had Josh from the start and loved Josh a lot. I proceeded to destroy Josh and put up a sign that blamed my other friend. I went to my other friend's base. He had a pet dog, so I concealed it. I then replaced it with a different dog and put it in the same spot as his original dog. I also took his 5 stacks of iron. I waited until they could go back into the realm. I told them that I had to eat lunch and muted my mic. I stayed there because I wanted to hear my entire plan unfold. When they loaded into the server, my friend freaked out. He immediately saw his llama gone and saw the sign. The other friend was confused on why he was yelling and screaming about why Josh was gone. My friend went to my other friend's base and eliminated the fake dog. My other friend started yelling at my friend. I ended up ruining a friendship that didn't get better for 3 years. Story 15. My high school art teacher was snappy and very rude. Let's call her Mrs. B. Mrs. B also had her very own clique of talented students. Basically, if she didn't like your art, she didn't like you. Such energy was directed towards my friends and me. I didn't take too kindly to this. So I joined her AP, Advanced Placement Art class, which was a fast-track way to become one of her favorites. Now, Mrs. B had a habit of divulging all of her personal troubles to her favorites because they were her friends. She was telling minors things that no student or child should know about their teacher, like the details of her divorce or how she was involved with a married man. I gathered all of these details from the last semester of my junior year of high school to the end of the first semester of my senior year. This was when I told my Spanish teacher, Mrs. J. Mrs. J didn't like Mrs. B, so the principal was obviously informed. By the end of the day, every teacher, student, and faculty member was told one way or another Mrs. B's reputation had been ruined and she had been forced to resign. I have no regrets. Story 16. Once in high school, my best friend borrowed a school book from me because she wanted to copy the important pages and couldn't find hers. Afterwards, she told me she gave it back to me and I just lost it somewhere. She definitely did not, since it wasn't her problem. She didn't bother searching with me. Spoiler, I never saw that book again. Fast forward to when exams were coming up. It was about 3 weeks before. My dumb self didn't have a book to study with. I remembered I was still mad that she lost my book. Under pressure, I took her book out of her backpack and took it home. At first, I just wanted to copy the whole book and give it back without her noticing. Again, spoiler, I did not. We didn't really have a good relationship then because she would get mad at me for days and only talk to me when she didn't understand something, and I was sick of it. To get to the point, she failed the exam. She started asking me about the book 3 days before the test. Apparently, she didn't notice it was missing for 3 whole weeks. I still have mixed feelings about this, and I kind of feel bad because I could have just bought a new one. She was kind of toxic at the end, though. They were like $40 or something. Expensive, but still. Story 17. I was in JROTC, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps in high school. I was in my 3rd year and had gained some credit with some of the recruiters that would come to the high school. We had this one kid who I will just call Chad, who pesters everyone, "I will beat you up because I'm bigger than you" kind of jock that would refuse to listen to anything we would tell him to do. He was also a huge bully, which hit me personally since I was a bullied kid all through school, and JROTC really helped me through some tough times. Chad was assigned to my classroom and I was his squad leader. Now bear in mind, JROTC doesn't mean we can do things like make them do push-ups whenever, but when we would do certain drills, the teachers would give us some leeway. I was always very fair with everyone in my squad. You didn't get penalized until you actually caused an issue. Now Chad decided he wouldn't listen to me or any advice on how to march better, threatening to assault me, and so on. This went on for several weeks, and then I discovered he had signed on with one of the recruiters. I asked a few questions about what he thought of Chad, and he had a very high opinion of him and thought he would do very well. I knew where the recruiters parked, which gave a nice full view of where we would do drills, so I asked the recruiter to just sit in his car and watch during the time where I would be leading the drills that day. Needless to say, Chad did what he always did, slacked off, and was wildly arrogant with me because I was smaller. Afterward, I learned that the recruiter wouldn't sign him, but the entire office he worked in wouldn't. He would have had to go to the next town over after he graduated to find a recruiter that would give him the time of day, and even then, he would have to explain why his local one wouldn't take him. I earned a reputation after that whenever kids had issues with bullies because I found ways to make them pay for it long term without throwing a punch. I don't really feel bad about it. If you're joining the military, be ready to take orders from someone smaller than you, even if you don't like it. And if you're enjoying the video too, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 18. I got tired of a classmate who would cheat by looking at my test. He was sort of a bully, but I wasn't a good target because I would fight back. I noticed that his math grades improved while sitting next to me and realized why. So the next test, I just wrote all kinds of wrong answers, like wildly inaccurate ones. He should have known they weren't right. He jumps up and turns in his test. I smiled at him and erased all of my answers and wrote the correct ones. He got 0, and the teacher knew then something was wrong. He was subsequently made to do his tests alone in the corner of the room. Parents were called, the whole 9 yards. I think he even had to repeat the class. I sort of felt bad that he got caught, but 5th grade me was mean enough to not let it bother me for long, lol. Story 19. First, let me just say I was a very angry young man in high school. I'm no longer quite so angry. I'm not sure why, but this one kid seemed to have fun pushing people off the walk in the outdoor hallways in between periods. He'd just wait until just before the bell rang and then push you right into a mud puddle. He got mean twice. I noticed as this guy walked to school like myself, we went in opposite directions, but I knew his neighborhood, and I knew the path he'd have to take. I went on up ahead and found a shovel on the back porch. I waited for him to come around the corner and then struck him sharply in the small of the back with the flat of the shovel. He went down to his knees and I kicked him so he's lying flat on the ground. I put the blade of the shovel on the back of his neck and told him if he did it again, I would cause him serious harm. He avoided me at school after that, and I saw less and less of him until one day I realized I just didn't see him around at all anymore. I'm not sure what I intended beyond getting him to stop bothering me, but I suspect I did way more than that. Story 20. I was pretty immature as a 14-year-old and also very much into computers at a time when they were just becoming popular. So security, both in terms of services and people not knowing not to run random programs they get emailed, wasn't that great. I thought it would be funny to access my friends' accounts without permission. So I had both people's passwords and employee access to AOL so I could tell what private chat rooms people were in, when usually you could only know that they were in a private chat room and read all their email. So it didn't take long to find out people's secrets if they used the computer. One day, one guy wouldn't stop making fun of me, nothing serious, just friendly teasing among friends. So I pulled him aside and said, yeah, well, at least I'm not into certain private chats and unusual activities. The dude was mortified. As I said, I was a schmuck at that age and didn't appreciate the impact of an implied threat of revealing a bi kid with unusual interests in the 90s. Yes, obviously it's still wrong now, but it was much less tolerated back then, especially in rural Florida, or how wrong it was to violate people's privacy by getting into their accounts. Story 21. In like 4th grade, there was this kid named T. He had anger issues, weird hobbies, and was constantly yelling at anybody and everybody who did anything to him, even as little as looking at him the wrong way or asking him a question he didn't like to be asked, even if the person had no knowledge that he was uncomfortable being asked it. I'm sure the kid has probably yelled at someone for breathing the air around him anyway. He had been exceptionally angry the entire week before the big event. He sent a kid to the nurse after throwing a basketball at his head and was writing inappropriate words on his desk in Sharpie. But the thing that ticked me off was him taking my phone. T had always tried to make fun of me. I definitely wasn't the strongest kid or even had a lot of meat on my bones at the time. But this kid was like 4'9", 80 pounds and had a skin condition which caused the skin on his hands to be lizard-like. And he couldn't even make a fist without a struggle, so I knew I wasn't in any danger, so I didn't bother doing anything to him about it. And in all honesty, I felt bad for the kid. After the kid took my phone, I had enough of him and the things he did to everyone. So while everyone was in line to go to lunch, I took candy from a candy bowl my teacher had hidden under his desk that she would occasionally take handfuls from and give some to students. And I took about 2 big handfuls, that would be like 4 to 5 of my teacher's handfuls, and put them in the compartment of his desk. Then, while at lunch, I wrote a note to a girl that I knew he liked expressing his love for her. and I put it on her desk before anyone got back in the classroom. I then sat at my desk with the biggest grin on my face ever and was the first person to walk in after me, the girl he liked. I made sure that the note had T's name on the front to ensure she wouldn't mistake it for a piece of scrap paper. She sees the note and reads it, and like a movie scene, as she's reading it, everyone walks into the class and the bell rings. I see her close the note and walk up to him. They chat for about 5 seconds and she lifts the note. They exchange words for about another 5 seconds and he has a confused look. And he looks in my direction and I look away and he looks back at her. As I'm thinking this is the funniest thing I've ever witnessed, I hear his very annoying and high-pitched voice yell, "I didn't write that note!" And clearly everyone heard but said nothing and stared at him in shock. Being clearly angry, he grabs the bottom of the kid's desk and flips it over. I was in shock. I'd never even seen that kid give a high five because of how sensitive the skin on his hands was. Now that he's done that, his hands start hurting a bit and he's yelling still. The teacher calmed him down, but he ended up hurting even more after all that, so he had to go home. The teacher went to grab his things and found the candy I had stashed in his desk, so before he went on his way, she had a talk with him. Turns out the kid was suspended, only like 2 weeks. The girl told everyone about it, and it got spread to even more people in the older grades, so when he arrived, he was made fun of for it. He never made fun of anybody in the last 2 weeks of that school before he moved. I don't know where to or why, but it was suspected that his parents divorced and his mom moved away to Virginia or something, and since he had been getting made fun of, it would have just been hitting 2 birds with 1 stone to just take him with her. I doubt that's true, but I don't know, and I never will know. The kid was crazy, and I do not regret what I did. He deserved it. Story 22. This is a story my mom would never let me live down, even though I was still quite young at the time and barely remember it. Now, for context, I was always a really quiet, nice, and polite kid. One day in daycare, I and the other kids were all doing some arts and crafts, and I asked the girl next to me to pass me a certain crayon. According to the workers at the daycare, she was apparently quite rude and telling me no. So apparently, after a moment's silence, I just grabbed the nearest safety scissors and just snipped off a bit of her hair. Then I just grabbed the crayon and went on like nothing happened while she sat there in shock. I still don't know what came over me that day, but my mom always tells me that she got a call that day from the workers who were trying hard not to laugh when they told her that I just, kind of casually and out of nowhere cut this girl's hair like it was nothing. In hindsight, it wasn't really funny, but I guess the juxtaposition of that behavior coming from me was surprising. I do feel bad about it, though. Story 23. Growing up, I was a pretty troubled kid. I had a lot of pent-up anger and aggression that I didn't quite understand how to deal with. I suffer with ADHD, PTSD, and borderline personality disorders, so I'm not very in touch with my emotions. The main part of my life that has always triggered me was the departure of my infant sister, which occurred when I was 4 years old. So when I was in school, about 14, 15 years old, I was put in anger management class because of my aggressive and sometimes even violent behavior. There were about 9 students in this class. In one of the sessions, we were talking about what triggers our anger, and when I got to my turn to talk, I explained that my anger is triggered worse when people speak ill of my baby sister. I immediately started crying, then other students started crying too, and it was actually a comforting, bonding experience. The following week at anger management, one of the students, let's call him Jake, was in a bad mood and was taking it out on everyone else. After he disrespected one of the girls in the class, I snapped and told him to leave her alone. He then turned his aggression on me and instantly, without thinking, said, "Go to hell with your sister." I flew over the table to attack him, but I was restrained by the school security and Jake was sent home for his behavior. I remember being so angry that I started to cry. About 2 weeks later, I went to an adventure playground with some of my friends, and when I got there, I saw Jake standing with his friends. My head boiled and my body became full of rage. I didn't even think. I just ran at him and punched him, knocking him unconscious. But I was so angry that I couldn't stop. I sat on top of him and proceeded to repeatedly hit him in the face. The police were called and I was arrested and taken into custody. I sat in a cell for 17 hours before being interviewed. When they interviewed me, they explained the extent of his injuries. Because of my age and the fact that it was a first-time offense, I was let off extremely lightly. I was given a conditional caution, community service, and a fine, but they could have easily sent me straight to jail, so I was very lucky. I'm 22 now, I have a son, and I have changed my life completely and have my anger under control. Story 24. 2 of my friends had crushes on me in high school and drew on my car and paint pen as a way of being flirty and funny. I had really bad social anxiety and depression at the time and convinced myself that they were doing it to set me up or mock me. So I told them to never do anything like that again and I took my car to the car wash that day. I never apologized to them because I hadn't even grown up enough to understand my own emotions before graduating. I never saw either of them after graduating, but even if I did see them, apologizing wouldn't be for them, it would be for me. That makes it more selfish to apologize this many years later if I ever do see them. Story 25. This was over 20 years ago now, so I feel I can post about this. I actually genuinely still feel bad about this one. At the time, I had no remorse, but I'm older and wiser now. So I was at school, and this kid was pestering Indian kids and using offensive language toward them, saying he hates them. I'm half Indian, so I told him to push me around if he likes pushing Indians around. He tried to push me, but I was quicker and more mobile than him, so I pushed him first, hard. I wasn't expecting him to fall down the stairs and break his arm. I saw him a little while ago and he apologized. At the time, like I said, I felt no remorse, but I have realized with age and maturity that I was no better than him, really. Story 26. I was 16. My mom would keep this gross cup in the bathroom and it was always in the way of my cupboard, so I started putting it back in her cupboard, but with the toothpaste or whatever water in it, to teach her a lesson. One day I come upstairs and my mom has totally emptied my cabinet, put it all in a bag, and hung it in the tree outside the window adjacent to the bathroom. She just left an arrow drawn on my mirror pointing to the tree that said, "Tree." I was quite irritated, to state it mildly. One thing you need to know about my mom is that she hates snakes with a passion. She is absolutely petrified of them. I had one of those silly snake in a can type things and rigged it up inside my medicine cabinet so that it would spring out when you open the cabinet door. I then proceeded to smear some toothpaste on that cup she left in the way of my cupboard again, put the cup back inside her medicine cabinet, and then went about my business. I'd like to point out, at this point, I grew up doing dumb stuff back and forth to my mom, each time slowly escalating until one of us took things a hair too far. This normally took a few weeks of back and forth pranking. When a war was going on, never was a word uttered between us about the pranks. Mentioning the prank was only admitting that it irritated you, which means the other person won. Several hours after rigging the snake, my mom noticed that it interfered with her cup. In a bit of rage, she throws my cabinet door open only to be surprised by that damn spring-loaded snake. She screamed as loud as I'd ever heard someone scream, tripped over backwards, and landed on the toilet so hard she cracked the toilet bowl and needed medical attention for an injury. Thus concluded the bathroom cup saga. Story 27. I'm in the middle of getting revenge. I had an employee. He was difficult, but I needed him, so I tried to retain him. I genuinely wanted to keep him, but he wanted to be let go and given a severance package. Long story short, he quit and sued me personally, not my employer, claiming I was racist and he should get severance. The racism claim didn't bother me, but suing me personally did. He was claiming that the money I saved my entire life for should be his. He felt my kids' college money should be his for his unsubstantiated claim of racism. Okay, game on. My company hired the best lawyer money could get. I insisted we claim legal expenses if he lost because I didn't want this to happen to anyone else. There needed to be some risk to suing corporate employees personally. Well, he lost. He had no case. I wanted to retain him, and I wasn't racist. Now he faces severe financial hardship, and to make matters worse, this all happened while his wife was seriously ill. I ruined him financially. Whether he deserved it seems irrelevant. I don't feel good about it. Story 28. Yes, literally in middle school, a kid was bullying me by kicking me while he was climbing on monkey bars. I had had enough and grabbed his legs and yanked him off the bars. Because I was holding his legs, he hit the ground. It was actually gymnast bars indoors and the ground was hardwood. Everyone laughed, including me, and then the laughter turned to nervous chuckling as he lay there, unmoving. Someone noticed an injury and a girl screamed, and I just remember getting pulled away from the scene as two teachers pushed through the crowd and knelt by him. Ultimately, he was okay. He was taken to the hospital via ambulance and was out of class for a few weeks with a concussion and stitches. I got suspended for a week. The school actually wanted to expel me because of the gravity of the situation, but my dad convinced them to settle for suspension. After it came out that it was on record that I had complained to staff about the kid bullying me in the past, and no official action had ever been taken. Getting suspended sucked, and my mom was absolutely furious with me, but on the bright side, Revenge of the Sith came out a couple of days later, and I got to see it at midnight with no school the next day. Overall, I'd call it a win, even though I felt really bad for the other kid. Story 29. My cousin and I have always butted heads. He would always prank me and tell lies about me growing up, and my mom and dad would punish me because of his lies. And it happened for most of my childhood. My cousin is a classically trained baritone singer, or was. Myself, I have been in music production since I was 13. His senior year in 2007, he was applying for different music schools. All the schools, at least the ones he was most interested in, required him to send in a video of him singing. The rule said that it could be professionally recorded as long as no vocal enhancing effects were added. This was supposed to then lead to an in-person audition. On this fateful weekend, he genuinely asked me to record him performing a song for his entry piece for the schools. He gets the song perfectly on his first try. We listened to it a few times and we make sure that the audio is synced up with the video. What he didn't realize was I had auto-tune connected to his vocal track but turned off. So just as I was about to burn the DVD of him singing, I turned it on. I set the auto-tune to think it was adjusting a female voice, and the retune speed and rate set to high as possible, basically making him sound terrible and making the auto-tune extremely obvious. After it was burned, he made me make copies for all the schools. I made him exactly the amount he needed, no extras. And then I deleted everything as soon as it was done. All the school's rejection letters just said he didn't get accepted, never said why. He was devastated. He called all the schools, and for some reason, none of them told him exactly why he was rejected, even after asking if something was wrong with the DVD, but it was 100% my fault. He went from having a great possible future to peaking in high school. He still lives with my aunt. Being rejected by all those schools deeply affected him. He hasn't been the same since. Story 30. My brother has a sight disability and was just recovering from surgery when an older guy at school decided to confront him. Head trauma is extremely dangerous post-surgery. It was actually pretty dramatic, but I found him, walked by, and just said in the sweetest possible voice I could, "Your bike." Then I walked away. Anyway, the guy immediately decided to leave school and ride his bike home. He got into an accident and passed away. To be fair, it wasn't an empty threat on my part, so I do understand the need to flee. I might not have actually done anything to his bike in the end. I hadn't actually decided yet and would have only acted later in the day. But there was a crowd at that moment, and girls rarely do well in physical fights with guys, so verbal bait was fair game. I don't know how my brother felt about the incident, to be honest. He stayed home from school until after the funeral. My dad and the school, I know, messed up, but the guy was really a difficult person. We're kind of pleased. I didn't get into any trouble. I don't know if it was revenge because I didn't actually do anything, really. Maybe karma? Story 31. In 6th grade, this kid had a really nice pencil. I wanted it. I didn't really have a huge problem with the kid, other than I found him annoying at times. It was perfectly sharpened with a perfect eraser. It was just an ordinary number 2 pencil. In the middle of class, he left the room to go to the bathroom, and when no one was looking, I quietly took the pencil off his desk and put it in my backpack. The kid got back and was very bummed out that his good pencil had vanished. He looked everywhere, but he couldn't find it. I felt very guilty. After about 5 minutes or so of him looking, I grabbed the pencil from my bag and placed it on the floor under his chair while nobody was looking. I pointed it out to him, and he was happy as a clam that I found his pencil. Even though I technically gave him back the pencil, I still feel guilty about it to this day. Story 32. When I was a very young kid, probably in 1st or 2nd grade, my mom was helping me with my homework. It was just spelling and handwriting exercises, but we were both tired and frustrated. I was being difficult on purpose, and she snapped at me and said something along the lines of, "You need to do this homework so your handwriting gets better." In my kid brain, I interpreted that as her telling me I was stupid. I snapped back, "At least I don't have a bunch of blemishes on my face." At that moment, it felt like a sharp comeback. My mom had severe hormonal acne after she had my little sister, and it didn't end up going away until more than a decade later. It was her biggest insecurity. Yeah, that was the first time I ever saw my mom cry like that. I just got this horrible sinking feeling. And I think it was the first time I realized that adults had real emotions and weren't just detached godlike figures. And if any of these stories got to YouTube, here's more for you. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.